Coming up on this special year-end episode of Omnivore, building bridges to reclaim trust in science, embracing the food as medicine movement, and 3 technologies that are transforming food safety. It's the best of Omnivore from the editors of Food Technology Magazine and the Institute of Food Technologists.
This episode of Omnivore is brought to you by IFT membership. Connect with our diverse community and discover a world of new opportunities. Explore the benefits of membership at ift.org/membership.
Welcome to Omnivore from IFT and Food Technology, where we're revisiting some of our best conversations from 2024 that explore the intersection of business, science, and technology in the global food system. I'm Bill McDowell. Communicating science to a wary public is getting harder. According to the 2024 Edelman Trust Barometer, nearly 3/4 of consumers said they are just as likely to trust the opinions of someone like me as they are from an authoritative expert. Charlie Arnot, CEO of the Center for Food Integrity, says in order to break through, scientists need to steer the conversation beyond just the facts and focus more on shared values. I recently spoke with Charlie about how food scientists can bridge the trust gap and make their expertise more relevant to a sometimes skeptical audience. So Charlie, thanks a lot for joining us on the Omnivore podcast.
Bill, it's great to be here. Thanks for the opportunity.
According to the 2024 Edelman Trust Barometer, about 74% of people said that the opinion of someone like me has the same level of credibility as a scientist. So why do you think that there's been such a shift in terms of trust, or has there been a shift, I guess? And how do you think that scientists can work with this trend rather than against it?
It's frequently a point of frustration for scientists that they have this technical information that they know is going to be really relevant. It's going to be important conversations around diet, public health, ultra-processed, you name the topic. And science is absolutely essential. But science is never sufficient. And that's part of the equation that we have to help people understand is science is the foundation, but it's not going to be sufficient in building trust. Our peer-reviewed and published model shows that influential others is one of the key elements in building trust. When we did the research back in 2007 to 2009, an influential other was defined as a credentialed expert whose opinion I trust. Today, you would simply take off credentialed expert, and it's simply someone whose opinion I trust. So the evolution of social media, the proliferation of different channels, the ability to find information that supports your existing worldview, all have contributed to the erosion of trust or the reliance on science as kind of the foundation of trust. But it's a huge opportunity in my view for scientists, because scientists can be someone like me. The opportunity is to connect based on values and then introduce your expertise. So we all share common values in terms of wanting food to be safe, wanting it to be produced in a way that enhances our environment, that helps us meet our nutritional needs. We all care about those items and issues. So we can identify with that first and then share information will be much more effective.
In the op-ed you wrote for Food Technology, you referenced Galileo's struggles as a metaphor for these modern challenges. How does that compare to the skepticism that consumers are expressing, especially today when digital media has just accelerated the distribution of information?
So there's always been some level of skepticism based on culture, based on the opinions of those who are in power. But as you noted, what has changed is our communication environment. When I grew up, we had 3 television networks, ABC, NBC, and CBS, and each of us got the same 22 minutes of news every night. And so we had the opportunity to have a common information culture because the media doesn't tell us what to think, but they tell us what to think about by keeping it in front of us. But now, with the endless proliferation of channels, I can find media that reinforces my existing view that may or may not be science-based.
You actually say that facts in and of themselves really need to be used sparingly. You said they need to be used sparingly like salt. So what do you mean by that? And how does this notion of shared values really play out in practice, especially when you're dealing with an audience that has these deeply ingrained beliefs?
So historically, we've kind of thought of trust as this Pandora's box, and the lock on the box we believed would be open if we could find the right combination of data or science or facts. What we now know through our research is you have to cross that shared values threshold first, or any information you provide is simply going to galvanize the opposition that someone might have. So let's say, for example, that I don't believe in vaccination, and you come at me with all of the data around why I should vaccinate my children, why it's important for me to get the COVID vaccination, but you just galvanize my opposition because you're reinforcing my position and perspective that science simply doesn't get it, right? Science doesn't understand me and my objection. If you instead engage me in a conversation to say, I can tell you care very deeply about your kids and their health, and I really respect that. I care about my health and my children's health as well. Tell me more about your concerns about vaccination. Now you've established a relationship and some level of rapport. Once you've opened that door and you've been able to connect on values, then you are given permission, not overtly, but covertly, you've been given permission to begin to introduce some information. We tend to want to share everything we know, right? Under the assumption that somewhere in there will be a nugget that will connect with this person. This fact or that fact or the other fact will ultimately be persuasive. When what we know is once you make that shared values connection, a little bit of information validates you now as a credentialed expert and someone like me who I trust.
You'd mentioned in the article that the importance of listening without judgment as being a key component.
So if they're coming with questions or concerns or accusations about processed foods or overprocessed foods or lack of nutrients or too much sodium or, I can listen for that. And what I hear is, well, this is someone who's concerned about their health. This is someone who is interested in a healthier diet. This is someone who has this concern or that concern or another concern. Because what we hear from people is just the tip of the iceberg. We have no idea what's below the surface in terms of their life experience, what they're dealing with, the challenges that they see, the information they've had. All of that we don't get from that single question. We only get the tip of the iceberg. But if we can listen for a place to connect and then ask questions to better understand what are the underlying motives, what are the values, what's driving this concern, then we have an opportunity to really make a difference and connect with that individual in a way that is meaningful for them, which gives us the opportunity to have influence.
So you mentioned before about ultra-processed foods, because that is obviously the big discussion, the big debate du jour. Based on what you just said, what are some areas where you think that just in terms of driving or managing the discourse where maybe we're missing the mark?
Yeah. So oftentimes, if you are a food scientist, you will come at this as a technical conversation. So someone starts talking about ultra-processed food, and you go, well, there's this or that and the other thing I don't like about the NOVA definition. Well, I may think NOVA's a car, right? It's something that Chevy built several years ago and that I used to drive when I was in high school. So I have no idea what these technical concepts are, but I'm really concerned about overly processed foods because I've heard a lot about them and the potential negative impacts on my health or my family's health. So if we start getting into the technical conversation about ultra-processed foods, we've completely lost the public because that's a technical definition. Oftentimes these conversations are being happen within the dietetic community or within the scientific community or the regulatory community, but they're not happening with the public. And so the public concern is about processed foods. I know the distinction between an apple and a bag of Doritos, but all of that gray area in between is confusing to me. And so what I really want is information that helps me make an informed decision that's best for me and best for my family. So ditch the technical language, help me understand and use language that's relevant to me. Now, one of the things that I hear sometimes is, well, that's dumbing it down. It is not dumbing it down. It's making it relevant. And that's an art, right? That's an art because all of a sudden now you've made your expertise accessible to me. And that gives me the opportunity to value your expertise in an entirely different way.
So less, more listening and less talking past each other.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And, we're all guilty of it. In my previous life, I worked for a company that was frequently attacked, and I had all of the scientific data. So immediately when someone started talking, I was going through my mental Rolodex, preparing for my fact-based response, and all I did was alienate people. And so when we began to focus on trust as opposed to defending a position, we found entirely different strategies that are now much more effective.
Charlie Arnot is the CEO of the Center for Food Integrity, a nonprofit organization that applies research, strategic insights, and best practices to build consumer trust in the global food system. You can read more of Charlie's thoughts on better communicating food science in the October issue of Food Technology. We'll be back with more Omnivore in a moment, but first, this word from our sponsor.
IFT is the convener of the global food system. As a member, you'll cultivate your professional network within our global community, stimulate new ideas with the latest research and trends, and accelerate your growth with expert training and resources. Why wait? Visit ift.org/membership to join IFT today.
Welcome back to Omnivore. I'm Bill McDowell. Whether you refer to it as food is medicine or food as medicine, this concept has been getting a lot of attention lately. While the idea that the food we eat impacts our health might seem obvious, the direct connection between food and healthcare has often gone unnoticed or avoided entirely. Many organizations across both the public and private spectrum are working to change that. Instacart Health is one of them. Started in 2022 by the grocery technology company Instacart, the initiative aims to advance the food as medicine movement through partnerships, research, and policy advocacy. Food Technology Magazine's deputy managing editor Kelly Hensel recently chatted with Beatrice Abiero, policy research senior manager at Instacart, about the company's efforts to advance the movement.
Well, thank you for joining me today, Dr. Abiero. I really appreciate the chance to talk to you more about Instacart Health and the food as medicine kind of movement. And to start out, I wanted to ask you, I've been hearing a lot about food as medicine or food is medicine lately, and it seems like in a lot of news outlets, it's getting a lot of attention. And I was wondering what it means for you. What does that phrase mean for you?
For me, I hear this phrase often as well. And what food as medicine means to me is a movement about embracing the power of food to improve health outcomes. And I had to step back to think about what movements are to begin with. And when we think about movements, we think about an effort to challenge and change how we as a society think about an issue. And in the food as medicine movement, the push is to think about the role that food plays in our health. And the underlying notion really isn't new. We've heard phrases like you are what you eat. But over the past few years, what we've seen is that this momentum and movement accelerate as more physicians, researchers, and academics in the United States and around the world embrace the idea that nutritious food can help promote long-term wellness and potentially treat or prevent illnesses. My background is in public health, and being at Instacart, for me, was an opportunity to go back to my public health roots because food is inherently a social determinant of health. And at Instacart, we recognize that many of the biggest health problems are really food problems. There are two stats that are really staggering. The first is that more than 1 in 10 people in America don't have reliable access to nutritious food. And more than 100 million people in the United States suffer from diet-related disease. And this subsequently impacts healthcare costs, where we see that 85% of our healthcare costs come from treating chronic diet-related diseases. And at Instacart, we believe in the power of food to improve health outcomes. And guided by our CEO, PG Simo's vision, we believe that we can help more closely integrate food and nutrition in our healthcare system.
I was really surprised in a good way to hear that Instacart was getting involved in this kind of movement. It's really nice to see such a big company that has such wide reach getting involved on the ground level. I was thinking about this as a movement as well. And I was thinking, there was a lot of movement around making things carbon neutral. There's a lot of things about your carbon footprint. And, it tended to be overused or used by marketing in a bad way, I guess. And it ended up being kind of greenwashed. And I was wondering if there's any fear, maybe it's not warranted, of something similar happening to the phrase food as medicine.
That's a great question. And I think a legitimate concern. But for me, I'm not concerned about the overuse of the phrase. And that's because we're actually talking about food for the first time in a different way than we have in some time. And I actually think that it's useful to have this phrasing because it helps us rally around issues around food, raising awareness and its importance that it could play when it comes to nutrition and health. And one thing that I've observed being in meetings, talking to other stakeholders within the food space and observing just what's happening within the literature is that there's intentionality behind understanding the role food can play in our health and with this phrasing. But there is one thing that I think is important to be mindful of as part of this discussion, and that is the personal connection that people have with food. It can bring up lots of things for people, right? But I think it's really important for the decision makers and the stakeholders that are part of the discussion to be mindful of the personal connection that people have with food and ways to support individuals on the journey, wherever they are within their food journey. And so I'm not concerned with the overuse of this phrase. I'm glad that it is becoming a more mainstream part of conversation. So then it's at the core of how we think about the role that food plays in our healthcare and for promoting our wellness.
Interesting. I love the use of your word intentionality, because that really makes all the difference, right? Being intentional in how we use it and how we as a society, from healthcare practitioners down to food manufacturers, are working with it. I know that a big benefit of Instacart as an organization is that you guys have a big reach and you have lots of partnerships. And I know you talked about some of them in the dialogue article that you wrote. What other partnerships that you guys are either working on or starting are you particularly excited about?
At Instacart, specifically sitting on the research side, we have some exciting partnerships underway. I'll highlight 3 research partnerships. One with the University of Kentucky Food as Health Alliance, and the second is with 2 entities, No Kid Hungry by Sheriff Strength and Mercy Housing. And the last one was with the Journal of Healthcare for the Poor and Underserved at Meharry Medical College. With the first study that I mentioned, we're partnering with UKY to conduct a food prescription study for 2 target populations, individuals with gestational diabetes and individuals with hypertension or type 2 diabetes. The goal of this study is to provide nutrition education to participants, empower them in order to then choose groceries that really align with what connects to them, and then ultimately improve health outcomes. Another key aspect of the study is to understand how to drive cost efficiencies for food as medicine programs, particularly in rural communities in Kentucky. What the researchers value too is that for traditional food prescription programs, typically participants are given like a food box, like where they don't have a choice of what goes into it. But when they're using a product like Fresh Funds, where participants receive the education, have a tool set to refer to and to understand what they could shop for, they really are able to tap into that dignity of choice to then choose what's relevant to them, meeting them where they are, and then being able to support their ongoing journey, whether it's with gestational diabetes or hypertension. For the second study, we're working with No Kid Hungry and Mercy Housing. These are 2 nonprofit organizations to expand access to nutritious food and nutrition education, kind of similar to the University of Kentucky partnership, but specifically for families who are in affordable housing communities in food deserts, which are really low income, low access areas. And so through this partnership, 200 families living in affordable housing communities in California and Georgia will receive ongoing nutrition guidance and support from No Kid Hungry, as well as Instacart Plus memberships. What this allows is a free delivery on orders that are $35 or more, and monthly Instacart Health Fresh Funds grocery stipends for a full year. This study is still ongoing, and so we're anticipating being able to learn more about results in the coming months. And then the final partnership that I'd mentioned involves the Journal of Healthcare for the Poor and Underserved, which was founded at a historically Black college university, Meharry Medical College. And what we're doing, this is a first at Instacart, we're producing a supplemental issue on research related to food access. And so the journal typically publishes different issues each month, but for the November 2024 issue, this issue will be in partnership with Instacart and focus on food as medicine research, innovations in that space, especially for individuals in historically marginalized communities. So when research studies that have highlighted those communities, they'll be included as part of the supplemental issue. And so these 3 different research partnerships are underway. We have others that are ongoing and under discussion, and we're excited to share results over the coming months to help inform the food as medicine initiatives.
That's wonderful. I was just thinking the University of Kentucky one, I actually had gestational diabetes, and I have access to, I'm lucky enough to have access to a great healthcare team, and I still had questions about what I should be eating, what I shouldn't be eating. So I think it's an amazing idea to really obviously tie in food and healthcare more closely. It's definitely needed everywhere. Instacart Health launched very recently, 2022. So it's still very early stages, but I was wondering if you could give us, the listeners, a taste of what kind of outcomes you would like to see in the next 5 to 10 years.
In the next 5 to 10 years, I think there's an opportunity to focus on improving access. Ultimately, this work is about ensuring that every person in every community can access the nutritious food they need to live a healthy and fulfilling life. As I mentioned earlier, 1 in 10 Americans doesn't have reliable access to nutritious food. And so I think for the next 5 to 10 years, there's a real opportunity for public and private sector partners to help bridge this gap. And secondly, we hope to see food and nutrition continue to be integrated more widely into healthcare. And so what this means, from my perspective, is that it starts with ensuring that food as medicine is a big part of the healthcare conversation. And ultimately, it means more healthcare providers and insurers are building food programs into their approach to care and thinking about nutrition as a key tool to promoting wellness.
Yeah, I think it's really exciting what Instacart is doing, and I can't wait to see more of these results come out. So thank you so much, Dr. Abiero, for coming on the show today, and I really appreciate your input.
Beatrice Abiero is Policy Research Senior Manager at Instacart and a member of the Bipartisan Policy Center's Food as Medicine Working Group. You can read more of Dr. Abiero's thoughts on the food as medicine movement in the June issue of Food Technology. The high-profile E. coli incident in October that spurred McDonald's to pull its popular quarter-pounder hamburger in 8 U.S. states is a stark reminder that foodborne illness hits hard and fast. The U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention estimates that 48 million people get sick from foodborne illnesses each year. That's about 1 in 6 Americans. And for food manufacturers, retailers, and food service operators like McDonald's, the average cost of a single food recall is estimated north of $10 million. There are several emerging technologies, including light-based technology, cold plasma, and hydroxyl radicals, that have the potential to significantly improve real-time pathogen control in food processing and production. Food Process Authority Larry Keener spoke with Food Technology's Science and Technology editor Julie Larson-Brisher about why these potentially game-changing technologies should be part of every food company's playbook.
Well, hi, Larry. It's always an enlightening day when we get to talk food safety, especially when it comes to advanced technologies.
Thanks, Julie. It's always good to talk food safety with you, and thanks for having me on the podcast. I'm delighted to engage with you this morning.
Well, okay, let's dive right in then. You wrote this great article for us in the November issue on that highlighted 3 food safety game changers in terms of technology. And you mentioned the first one was light-based technologies. Now, it seems like the COVID-19 pandemic really pushed these technologies forward. What are some of the applications that make this a game changer for food safety?
As you know, Julie, light-based technologies have been around for a long time. I've written about them in the past for decontamination of hard surfaces, for food contact surfaces, but they've had limitations because UVC the portion of the spectrum that's referred to most often as the germicidal wavelength has some associated dangers, blindness, cancer, when it's exposed to workers. Then there was the other downsides of the light-based technologies, because heretofore they had been lamp-based. And when they were mercury vapor lamp, then you brought mercury into a food processing environment, that you introduced another risk. Those lamps produced heat, they produced ozone, they had a short shelf life, they weren't very efficient. But then we have now the light emitting diode. That's the real game changer. That's the game changer for the moment. The LED is going to usher in a whole new era of light-based technology controls in the food processing industry. They're efficient. They produce monochromatic light. We can tailor the light wave to the specific microorganism. For example, Listeria is better killed at a wavelength that is different than a wavelength that is used for salmonella, for instance. And with LED, we can do that. With the lamp-based technologies, we didn't have that option because they were polychromatic. They produced lots of light, UV light, and lots of it was wasted. So the LED UVC is going to be uptaken by the industry for cleaning up, enhancing its HVAC systems, and because of the greater flexibility that you have now with the LED as opposed to a lamp, a large lamp, you have greater flexibility in how you approach and how you might use light-based technologies in the food industry like we've never had before. This flexibility, this increased efficiency, and also reduction in cost make these light-based technologies exceedingly attractive to the industry and to my way of thinking.
Yeah, Larry, that's true. And here's something that I never thought that I would see in a game changer article like this. You also highlighted atmospheric cold plasma. I always think of that as a novel emerging technology, but it's coming on strong in food production circles. Can you talk about the applications that are currently out there?
Yeah, so as you're right. The study of atmospheric cold plasma, as we call it, has really took off in about 1999, 2000, and there's been a great deal of interest internationally in the plasma technologies, and in that interim, researchers have investigated the use of atmospheric cold plasma on leafy greens, on fresh produce like apples and oranges and or cantaloupes. It's been looked at for use in the disinfection of the surfaces of shell eggs, tree nuts, and other food items, and with a modicum of success. The technology works. It inactivates pathogens, but the issue immediately with direct food contact is that the reactive oxygen species, the reactive nitrogen species, the ozone, the UV light that's created in the plasma, that's a lot of very aggressive chemistry. And it's unregulated chemistry. So the chemistry at the surface of the treated substrate raises questions about byproducts. And and are these byproducts safe or are they a challenge? So that's the hurdle that we have to surmount immediately with bringing atmospheric cold plasma to the industry for direct treatment of food. Now, another more immediate application is for the treatment of hard surfaces, zone 1s, food contact surfaces, floor drains, these for the treatment of portable equipment and utensils in the food processing environment. These applications can proceed without, jumping through the regulatory hurdles and presenting a master file to the FDA and getting them to sign off that they accept this technology for use in food processing. So there is the great advantage. And at the moment, we've got these recalls that are primarily the results of contaminated food processing equipment. And I think what an intervention like atmospheric cold plasma has the possibility, the real possibility for the reduction of those pathogens in the environment of the food processing facility.
Well, Larry, up until recently, as you point out in your article, producing hydroxyl radicals at scale has been a technical barrier to scaling for use, as a food safety preventive control. What's changed, and how does this molecular technique work? Why is this a game changer?
Well, the game changer here is as you point out, the challenge has been in how we produce the hydroxyl ions. And so these new cleaning devices that are available use scission of water vapor with UV light. And that has been a game changer as opposed to the old Fenton chemistry that was very complicated, where you had to use a metal plus UV to catalyze hydrogen peroxide. It was very cumbersome technique. But hydroxyl radicals have been around and studied for a long time. On a sunny day, the typical concentration is between 3 and 10 million hydroxyl radicals in each cubic centimeter of ambient outdoor air. Hydroxyl radicals don't form indoors because they're tied up almost immediately with volatile organic compounds. But their effectiveness for cleaning ambient air is well studied, well documented. They have an effect on biofilm reduction on flat surfaces. And speaking of COVID, it's interesting that one paper that I read suggested that COVID virus, after exposure to 80 minutes to a concentration of 3 to 10 million hydroxyl radicals, was completely eliminated. So this technology has a promising future in cleaning ambient air in a food processing facility.
Wow, that I meant it when I said it at the beginning of our conversation today, that it is always enlightening to talk to you. And I really want to thank you for sharing your insights with us today, Larry. It's always a pleasure.
Thank you, Julie. Thanks for having me.
Larry Keener is the founder and president of International Product Safety Consultants and an internationally regarded microbiologist and process authority. He frequently works with food companies on regulatory compliance, risk assessment, and process optimization from raw materials receipt to finished product storage and distribution.
Thank you to this episode's sponsor, IFT Membership. Satiate your hunger for knowledge, connection, and career growth with an IFT membership. Discover the benefits and activate yours at ift.org/membership.
And that wraps up this episode of Omnivore. Thanks again to all our guests and my colleagues at Food Technology. Omnivore is produced and distributed by the Institute of Food Technologists. If you enjoyed today's show and want to learn more about Food Technology Magazine or how to join the conversation by becoming an IFT member, visit ift.org/membership. For more in-depth discussion about innovation in the science of food, check out IFT's other podcast, Side Dish, on the News and Publications page of ift.org. If you have comments or suggestions for future shows, just send us an email. The address is editors@ift.org. For the entire team at Food Technology and IFT, I'm Bill McDowell. Thanks for listening, and join us again for our next episode.